Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the Blacklist. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So obviously, because of the nature of this episode, I'm going to split things up between the Glenn stuff. I'm going to do that second and just kind of get the other, like the Wellstone agency stuff out of the way. But we'll kind of start off with that. So first and foremost, it was interesting. For one, this episode also presented us an opportunity, obviously, spend more time with Park and get to know her more. Obviously, we got introduced to her friend Melissa, and obviously that whole thing in the beginning. But it was interesting for Park to be like the new Liz to a certain extent, being like the one that actually goes to Reddington about the new Blacklister. And I think that was so interesting because I was like, why not Donald? And it's like, I'm sure a wrestler isn't too fond of like probably being the in-between, and Harold's not going, so it ended up being Park. And Park was making an excuse that, he was big. I also love her being like, why does like basically everyone like go into like the restaurant business? It's like, oh, this is an office and this. He's like, oh, you want something to eat? She's like, no. He's like, coffee? And she's like, no. Like, what's this all about? The Wellstone agency being this agency that obviously, with a lot of discretion is able to help criminals get what they need, and so Reddington knows that Liz went to the Wellstone agency for something, but it's like, finding out what it is isn't going to be the easiest thing. He says he had someone beforehand, but it didn't work out. So part of me is like, is it his lawyer, like, that he kind of screwed over a couple episodes ago? That might have been his end. And he was like, kind of burned that bridge right now, so he's not really in the mood to help. I'd assume that's what that was in reference to. But what I thought was so, it's like, okay, this is about finding Liz. And because it's like, well, we can find out who she met with and why, then maybe we can track down Liz, which Park had the comment of, don't you think you should leave Liz alone, that maybe you're making matters worse? Which I love him being like, oh, like the next time you decide to unburden yourself, being on your high moral high ground against me, against us who are on the lower high ground, But, in situations, you come and ask a favor from people like me. She's like, I will never ask a favor from you again. And he was like, yet here I am asking you for one. So it is interesting because I get where Reddington's also coming from, and I get where Park is coming from, because it's like, you're just making matters worse by going after Liz. But I think, in Reddington's own way, like whether you really believe it or not, like, I think they believe it. It's like, he does legitimately care for Liz, and he's scared that if she keeps going down this route, she's going to go down a route she ain't going to be able to come back from. It's like, this isn't what he wanted for her. Like he told him, it's like, I never planned for any of this, for things to spiral out to what they are now. Because a lot of stuff, even Reddington gets blindsided from time to time. Once again, she's always his blind spot, but there's so much other stuff. Katarina coming back, all that blindsided him. The stuff that Dom told her, blindsided him. So it's like a lot of external forces kind of created the circumstances they're currently in many, many different regards and facets. So, but you also understand where Park's coming from, because it's like, yeah, you might want to help her, I get it, you care about her, but you also kind of need to realize you're the reason she's in this position in the first place. Granted, yeah, remember, you killed her mom, along with a lot of other stuff, but more recently, her mom, so that kind of sent that relationship over the edge. But nevertheless, so because of this, they got to get to the Wellstone agency, and it's like, oh, like, Russell's like, I only know English, Park is like, I know Korean, and then you have, Aram being like, the sign language accountant is like, no. He's like, well, then I'm down to 6. It's like, wait, you know 6 different languages? He's like, yeah. And not including Latin, unless I was, talking to the Pope. And he's like, oh, that'd be a really interesting confessional. But now, like, Aram ended up having to go undercover, which this is a complicated thing, because even, like, Reddington's in between dude. It's like, if you screw this up, if they find out that you're like, I'm only doing this because Reddington's telling me to, I'm telling you straight up, this is going to be a suicide mission. The fact of the matter is, if you get burned, it's not just going to be you, it's going to be me as well, and they're going to kill anyone they believe to be a liability. But Aram is like, all right, pops the pill. Interesting enough, it's a red pill. Which is interesting too, because later on they reference like, oh, you have to, the matrix of tests. And I was like, all right, because there's the red pill and the blue pill. I always forget which one is, because the red pill takes you back to, keeps you sleep. The blue pill wakes you. I don't remember. It's been so damn long since I've seen The Matrix. I don't remember what. I always confuse that in my head. I think a lot of people end up forgetting that just because it's been so long. Regardless. But, it's like, all right, it's your funeral. And Ron wakes up and goes through this long list of tests, which I thought was fascinating, having to prove himself. I even love how he skirted around that situation. He was found out, and it's like, he's like, really? You put me through all these matrix of tests, and look at this. You left someone's information open. And I was like, I love that's the typical thing of like when you're caught in a bad situation, you flip it on the other person. It's like, you think I'm doing wrong. I caught you in the wrong. You know, so I'm surprised that worked out for him. But luckily, because of that, they were able to find out the guy, the in between, the interpreter for Liz. And then it turns out, you know, Reddington ends up warning that interpreter ahead of time. And I love it's like, you know, he's like, I can't help you. Like, I don't know the name of the dude. It was some Bosnian person. I never saw the envelope. And Reddington's like, all right, call your person and tell them Raymond Reddington wants to talk. And it's like, oh, it's always that look of like, and tell him Reddington wants to talk. It's like, wait, what? It's almost like oh my God, I'm in front of criminal royalty. I cannot talk today. I apologize. So I was like I said, that's always that neat moment when people find out it's Reddington they're in front of. So then he has a meet with the colonel, because I love Aram is scared too, because he's like, oh crap, this isn't good. And Aram's walking into what he thinks is sure death. And it turns out, Reddington's there. And it's like, hey, sit down. You're going to be the interpreter, because the colonel is deaf. And it's like, yes, the head of an organization that interprets stuff and translates stuff needs an interpreter to translate for him. And it's like, I guess that's why the business is kind of, it's been around. I mean, we don't know the full history behind this agency, like how long it's been around. It makes you wonder, is he the first leader? Like, has the colonel always been the leader? Like, has he kind of run this organization for a while? So maybe his circumstances is why he created the agency to be what it is. But Aram is translating for him. It's like, oh yeah, there's an FBI agent mole and everything. I was like, what is Reddington? Like, there's no way he's going to let Aram get killed. But I was like, is he going to like throw Aram to the wolves at first and then like end up helping at the end? But then he does. He's like, no, he's not your interpreter here. The reason why I asked for him specifically, because he's super new. Because whoever is the mole predates him. And I was like, nice save. And part of me was wondering at first, I was like, oh, is that your way to, not only save Aram, but I was like, are you going to keep him like undercover long enough to like, you could benefit from this later on? But it's like, no, this way it keeps up his cover. I mean, maybe this whole thing could come back to help in certain forms later on, but maybe not. But when it's all said and done, they were able to take down the entire organization, because apparently Reddington was wearing a wire, and it's like, yeah, we're going to say Aram was wearing the wire, which I think is interesting. I find that so fascinating. I'm curious, like, why. I guess Reddington figured this be like the best option, because of all this stuff that went down with the previous blacklister that got like freed previously. I guess, was it last episode? I guess all that kind of probably is like, because I'm curious, like, what made him decide to wear a wire, like, under those circumstances. I don't know. And I guess it was kind of an olive branch, considering, a lot of blacklisters are potentially, especially because, once again, the task force is getting like the rough end of the stick, just because like a lot of people are judging them for their actions of like, how dare you work with Raymond Reddington type of situation. But what was interesting, though, is Reddington did end up telling Cooper the name. I guess he wanted to get a lead first and look into it. And was like, all right. Well, I guess it's more so than anything, like, if he let Aram read it first, it would have been a thing of, like, it would have probably, at first it would have seemed like maybe there was a connection there. Maybe that's why he did that and ended up telling Cooper anyway. But I guess it's like he wanted to at least get, like, the head start, like a 15-minute head start. But even Cooper was like, yeah, because Reddington knows if we want to bring Keen back, we need to do this together. So there was that side of things. So they're close to, they ended up finding out, like, it's a Bosnian bounty hunter. Is he hired now for what purposes? I don't know. Because once again, you can only assume, like, every move Liz is making has to be a move against Reddington. So, I mean, maybe there's a larger play it here. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see to get the full spectrum of everything that Liz has planned. So there's all of that. But then on the, kind of along those terms, I was about to forget, because I was about to move on to the park stuff. The other side of things is Cooper gave Aram the flash drive, and it's like, well, I got to use this. He can't unlock it on his own, so he's going to someone from the NSA. It's like, well, whoever it is, make sure you trust them because their lives could be in danger if Reddington finds out we have that flash drive. So once again, I guess I still think like this got to be an attack on Reddington from multiple fronts. So she's attacking from that front, letting FBI know I'm still on your side. We're also going to expose Reddington for who he is, because I think that's the way. Like, not only is she going to take over his business, I mean, probably when she gets control of it, all she'll probably do is dismantle it. Maybe not. Who knows how Liz will handle it, like whenever the business is officially hers, like, and she manages to quote unquote kill Reddington or remove him from the board by maybe, because for him, discretion has kept him in the dark and kept him in his empire. Like, I think if she's able to expose him to everyone, then in the long run, I think that will be kind of another win against him. But she wants to crush him. I think she wants to kill him and crush him. Not necessarily in that order, but you get what I'm trying to say. So we'll see. But focusing on the Park stuff, obviously, it turns out her friend Melissa went to a loan shark. It's like, and obviously they're behind on payments, so they set a restaurant on fire. Sadly, her friend Melissa ended up dying from it, because after, like, Park had arrested the guy responsible, but then, like, he managed to kind of get away because there was no evidence to really convict him on it. And now her friend is dead, which Cooper was like, you didn't think ahead of time, you acted on emotion. He's like, I know your rage can get you best of you, so please do not go after this dude. Like, he's going to be free, don't go after him. But then Jenna was scared because, like, they showed up. So Jenna had called, Park, and Park got involved. Hard cut to her just, like, wiping blood away from her. I was like, yo, that, like, home dude pulled a gun on her, and dude, Park lost her shit. Dude, I think that's such an interesting aspect about her, that she has to, like, because you wouldn't expect that, because she seems so calm and collected, but like the rage underneath. I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen it, but man, she bashed his head in, dude. It was like, holy, she just went bam, 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 bam. I was like, and she's like, you didn't have to do that. She's like, all I wanted to do was talk. And it's like, yep. The moment she said, like, I'm not going to ask you for a favor, you're like, ironically, you knew that was going to come up. So she asking Reddington. Now it's going to be a situation now. She's probably going to be like, shit, now I owe Reddington. So it's like, it's that sad thing of like, yeah, which she shouldn't feel too bad, because Wrestler was literally in the same situation. So, you're not the only one in that task force that's got skeletons in their closet. So you and Wrestler, eventually that's probably going to come out. Wrestler's going to like, nah, I got your back. Reddington did the same thing for me. So it's like, that might come out. We'll see kind of how that ends up playing out. But yeah. He might have implied and made it seem like he might have had connections. So I'm curious, like, whatever group he's a part of, are they going to come back? I mean, Reddington's good at disposing of bodies, but Park is associated with him. Granted, him disappearing like that, you have Cooper asking questions, where she's like, no, I left him alone. But it's like, those, I don't know, stuff with Reddington can stay buried, but who knows, maybe eventually Liz unearthing some of Reddington's stuff will, obviously, let's not forget, Kate exposed a lot. It literally showed everyone where their dead bodies were buried. So it makes sense. That was a little redundant. Not a little redundant for me to say the dead bodies. I should have just said where the bodies were buried. But regardless, you get what I'm saying. So that's an interesting thing in its own right. So I'm curious to see what happens now with the whole Park and Reddington relationship. Is she going to be the new, like I said, in between until Liz comes back? I mean, depending on what those circumstances look like. But other than that, we had the Glenn side of things, where it's like, hey, it's like Dembe and Reddington show up at Glenn's mom Paula's place, and it's the actress. I've seen her in multiple things, but the most recent thing I want to say was she was Marty and Wendy's therapist in season 3 of Ozark. So, but it's like, oh, what's this all about? And it's like, Glenn died. It's like, wait, what? Even like Reddington's taken aback by, he's like, what? No, like, and I'll let you know ahead of time. I didn't know, the actor who plays Glenn, Clark Middleton, I didn't know he actually did pass away in real life. Apparently last year sometime. And I didn't know that. So I was like ready to, I was like, I legitimately, because I didn't know, I was thinking like, oh, is this Glenn being an asshole again? Like he always does these like terrible jokes. And he's like, gotcha, I'm just messing with you. I was wondering whether or not that was the case or not. Because even Reddington was like, is this one of his practical jokes? It's like, no, Wes not. I was like, wait, what? Because I was like, Liz called him like 2 weeks ago, like, because it was like, oh, he died like 2 weeks ago. She was like, Paula was like, I kind of forgot, bring it up to you, because it's like, we know that Liz tried to call him to like, actually talk to him to like get Glenn on her side. I guess like him not popping up in the scene should have probably, I just didn't think too much about it, because I was just figuring like, oh, maybe because it was such a small thing, they didn't, and Glenn wasn't part of the story, they didn't need to. But Reddington was kind of taken aback by it, and I do like that. Yes, it's just obviously it has a sad element to it, but there is this like beautiful levity to that side of the episode, and I think it's very befitting because of Glenn. Because it's like Reddington read the letter and stuff like that, and it's like, oh, it's going to be at the celebration is going to be at the DMV at 7 p.m. And Reddington's reading the letter, and he is like, this is just like Glenn. The fact of the matter is, it's like, he wants me. Why is it my job to cover up? I paid him all this money, so why is it my job to explain where he got all this cash from? Because it's like, he was a civil servant. He can't really explain. It's like, yes, but the way he went about it, saying like, oh, Huey Lewis, he was his muse and everything. It's like, wait, what? Yeah, that was his lie, his excuse to explain everything. It's like, what is he trying to suggest, that Huey Lewis was like so infatuated with him, gave him all this money for? Because even Reddington was bringing up that car. I think that he was in the competition for. Was that last season? Was that the season before last? I think that was last season. I think it might have been last season. It might even been season 6, I don't remember, but that whole car situation, which is like, oh, dude. And then Reddington's also like, oh, and Glenn wants me to spread his ashes at the Statue of Liberty. He's like, I am not breaking into the Statue of Liberty to spread his ashes. He's like, I'm not doing anything to this for him. And it's like, Paula was wondering if you could bring this particular dish. And he was just like, I can do that. But it's like, he's like, I'm not doing all this other stuff. But it's like, come on, it's for Glenn. It's like, and Reddington kind of finally cracks. So he got in touch with Huey Lewis, which I'm not that well versed in Huey Lewis's music. I'm sure if you probably played a particular song, I'm like, oh, I love this song and I know this song. Like, it's one of those things where there's certain musicians you don't know. It's like what people say about the Beatles, like, you know a Beatles song even though you don't think you know a Beatles song. That type of situation. So I figured it's kind of along those same lines. But I love that Reddington comes to visit him. It's like, oh, how you know? It's like, oh yeah, I know your manager I did a favor for him. Actually, I did a favor for one of Jerry's friends. And I love Reddington because you never see him so kind of nervous about the whole thing, because he knows he has to pitch this to Huey. Like, okay, so I am willing to pay you to show my friend. He was the biggest fan of. He was such a huge fan of yours. And then like Reddington also has to placate it by being like, and he also might have said that he was the inspiration by one of your songs. It's like, wait, what? Yeah, and he kind of told his mom. It's like, she believed him. It's like, oh no, she didn't just believe him. She just like, oh my God, she believes. So it's like, yeah, and it's like, I will pay you whatever amount of money. It's like, wait, the funeral was at a DMV. What? He's just so confused. And it's just like, Reddington's like, come on, I will owe you a favor. I'm someone you're going to want to owe. I'll do whatever you ask. He's like, okay, so I need you to leave. So that didn't work out. So they're there, but then Huey shows up. He gives his fake speech about Glenn and everything. Be like, oh, but I couldn't get this one line. And then Glenn hit me with it. It was like, oh my God, it was magic. It's like Glenn and Paula's jelly bean. You're like, oh, and it's this celebration, and it's just it's beautiful in its own right. And, because that's, I think, both, for the character as well as the actor, I think that is always the thing about death. Like, it's a scary and it is a very extremely sad situation, but that's what it should, a lot of people want it to be, it's like, don't let my funeral just be something you just, something sad, like let it be an event, like let it be something we celebrate, and I think, rightfully so, it's very Glenn-like want a celebration like that. I mean, once again, Reddington's like, he's asking so much. I mean, he's like, it's almost like he's reaching up from the grave just to kind of screw me over or something, you know? And it's like, that in its essence is Glenn, and, you know? So, and I even love Huey being like, so, Mr. Reddington, he's like, you talk to Jerry. He's like, yeah, but like, why is the number one most wanted fugitive? Like, why was he so, it's like, oh, he worked for me. It's like, I'm not asking what he did for you. I'm talking about why he's so important to you. It's like, he's like, I could literally give you anything else. I'm good at, you know, he's like, hey, I've been thinking about other opportunities, but he's like, knowing and understanding the heart and soul of someone, there's not more powerful than that. And Reddington's like, no, there isn't. And it's like, all right. So Dinbei comes in with like some pet ashes, and it's like, he's like, you said you weren't going to do this, but I knew you were, so I got these ahead of time. So it's like, why are you doing this? It's like, all right, I'll explain on the way. And obviously, you know, it's like Reddington giving his eulogy for Glenn. And honestly, it was beautiful in its own right. It's because he was just the way he talked about Glenn. It was like, oh, he was one of a kind. He was a good tracker, but also just talked about Glenn being like, the one thing it's like he was maddening, infuriating, but the one thing he wasn't was afraid. Not afraid to be himself, not afraid to, you know, do whatever, even if it was wrong. Wasn't afraid of the consequences, wasn't afraid of, you know, bad timing or telling a bad joke. And I'm like, it's just like, it's one of those moments where you go like, yeah, Glenn, you know? And it's sad, you know, because at the end, Reddington would always joke and be like, we're not friends. But it's like, honestly, Glenn is a friend, you know. I'll honestly admit it. Glenn is probably my favorite associate of Reddington's, because anytime Glenn's always involved, it's always like, hell yes, I'm a part of this. I love this. So, you know, like I said, at the end to find out, like I said, I didn't know. So I was almost hoping, I was like, please tell me, like, this is a joke or something. Because I was like, why would they go out of their way to kill off the character? I mean, obviously there's sometimes that'll happen, but I was wondering if I was like, well, is it because, and then it said in memory of, I was like, damn, dude, that sucked. I'd like to believe, you know, I'm sure actors do this all the time, that they put a little bit of themselves in the character. So when they're talking about Glenn, then maybe they were talking about Clark as well, because like maybe a lot of aspects of Glenn was shared with Clark, you know? And so all I can say is, you know, R.I.P., you know, it's like, you know, death is always just that hard thing. Like, even if it's not someone you know, it's just, they would never just kind of like, you never want to hear about someone that died, but especially, you know, because like I said, you know, because this is a role I've kind of gotten to know Clark a lot from, so I will always associate Glenn with him when it comes to his work. But, you know, and, you know, like I said, I like to imagine that a lot of who Glenn was naturally a part of Clark, naturally. Anyway, that he put a lot of himself. It was able to kind of play with it, have fun, and be a part of his role in that regard. So, R.I.P. to, you know, rest in peace to Clark Middleton, but all, you know, and also to the character of Glenn. You know, it's just, it's going to be, you know, hard not having Glenn around, you know, anymore. You know, but like I said, it was a not just, you know, sad yet beautiful just celebration of, you know, I think both of Clark and as the, you know, and of the character Glenn. So kind of ending this on a bit of a somber note. That's why I kind of wanted to save this for last, which, yeah, I'm interested to see where things kind of go in the next episode. So I'll just leave things at that for now. So to the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.